Brooke Hogan finally exposes why she wants to be cut off Hulk Hogan's will. On Tuesday, July 29, Brooke Hogan finally broke her silence following the heartbreaking loss of her father, wrestling legend Hulk Hogan. Speaking publicly for the first time since his passing, Brooke delivered a moving statement shared by Page 6. "My father's blood runs through my veins," she said. "His eyes live on in my children. And the bond we shared, it was never broken. Not even in his final moments. What we had went beyond words, beyond time. It was something sacred, something eternal. I'm so thankful I got to know the man behind the spotlight, the real him, not just the version the world thought they knew. Anyone who ever saw us together could feel the unspoken connection we shared." Her heartfelt words paint a picture of a deep, enduring love between a father and daughter, one that remained unshaken despite past rifts. A source close to the Hogan family also spoke to reporters, offering insight into the relationship the world rarely saw. "There was still so much love between them," the source said. "He was always proud of her. Brooke was his little girl, no matter what happened. It's still hard to accept that he's really gone. The pain is raw, the grief still settling in, but through Brooke's voice, the world caught a glimpse of the man behind the legend, and the powerful, unbreakable bond that only a father and daughter could share." In the days following the death of professional wrestling legend Hulk Hogan, a cloud of mystery has begun to form, not around his legacy in the ring, but around the final wishes that were never fully reconciled between father and daughter. It was a Tuesday, July 29, when Brooke Hogan, his only daughter and once his most visible companion in both fame and family, finally broke her silence. Her voice, long absent from the public scrutiny during her father's twilight years, returned not with bitterness or blame, but with something far more haunting, grace laced with pain. Her statement, released through a calm yet commanding tone, read, "My father's blood runs through my veins. His eyes shine through my children. And our bond was never broken, not even in his final moments. We shared a connection deeper than words, a connection that spanned lifetimes. I am so grateful to have known the real version of him. Not just the one the world saw through a carefully controlled prism. We shared a silent, sacred bond that was perceptible to anyone who saw us together." It was a message that stopped hearts and turned heads. Not because it sounded rehearsed, but because it sounded unresolved. For years, the world saw Brooke Hogan as the princess of a wrestling empire, a shining blonde extension of her father's colossal brand. Hogan Knows Best, the reality show that made them both household names beyond the ring, painted a portrait of an ideal, if chaotic, American family. Brooke was always seen under the golden spotlight, her father shielding her like a lion would his cub. But that golden light, over time, exposed cracks. And now, in the wake of Hulk Hogan's death, those cracks are starting to collapse into deep chasms. While her tribute radiated love, insiders were quick to reveal that Brooke's recent decisions, most notably, her formal request to be removed from her father's will, are not an act of coldness, but an act of rebellion. One rooted in the very love she claimed. One born from disappointment. And one that may unearth the final, tragic truth of Hulk Hogan's dual legacy, wrestling icon to the world, but something far more complicated at home. Those close to the Hogan family were not surprised. There was always love, one source confided. But love doesn't mean there wasn't pain. Brooke had been struggling with how the public image of her father compared to who he became in private, especially in his later years. And when he passed, she felt that by staying attached to his financial legacy, she'd be endorsing a version of him that she no longer recognized. That decision sent shockwaves through the family. Lawyers were stunned. Fans were confused. Why would Brooke Hogan, a woman who had stood beside her father during his highs and lows, in front of cameras and behind closed doors, choose to separate herself from his final earthly possessions? The truth, it seems, lies not in a single moment, but in a long, unraveling series of events that saw Brooke gradually distance herself from the persona her father had crafted, and from the man he had become as he aged. It began with whispers. Years before Hulk Hogan's passing, Brooke had begun retreating from public appearances with her father. She declined invitations to events, even skipped several of his milestone celebrations. Photos of them together, once a staple in the tabloids, became increasingly rare. It was not a dramatic severance. There were no explosive statements or fiery accusations. Just distance. A quiet, widening space between the little girl who once sang on stage with her father and the woman who eventually walked alone. Sources close to Brooke say she began re-evaluating her relationship with her father after his highly publicized scandals, particularly those involving racial slurs and legal disputes. It broke something inside her, one close friend explained. Brooke saw herself as part of a legacy, yes, but one built on honesty, transparency, and integrity. When that image shattered in the public eye, she had to choose, continue to play along or take a step back. What followed was years of silence between them, not necessarily estrangement, but an emotional purgatory. Brooke would sometimes check in with him privately, send messages through intermediaries, even attempt reconciliation. But something had changed. She no longer sought approval. She no longer needed validation from the man who had once towered above her as both protector and provider. And yet, her statement on July 29 was not one of disconnection. It was one of profound sorrow. The sorrow of someone who had accepted loss long before death. A sorrow that doesn't need to wear rage to be understood. "I am so grateful to have known the real version of him," Brooke wrote. That line raised eyebrows, not because of what it said, but because of what it implied. Who was the real Hulk Hogan she spoke of? And what did the public never see? It's a question that has haunted fans and critics alike since the wrestling legend's name first appeared in scandals that contradicted his iconic persona. For Brooke, the dissonance was deeply personal. She had grown up believing in the myth, living in the glow of the Hulkamania era, sitting front row as fans screamed his name like a god among mortals. But gods, as mythology tells us, often fall hardest. Friends of Brooke recall moments in which she wrestled, not with anger, but with confusion. She didn't hate her father, said one longtime confidant. She hated the version of him that allowed fame to rewrite the boundaries of right and wrong. She hated the silences. The excuses. The moments where she needed a father and got a brand instead. Brooke Hogan's decision to be cut off from her father's will wasn't about money. It was about agency. About stepping out of a legacy she didn't entirely choose. About saying, in her own way, "I loved you, but I don't want to inherit your sins." What we're witnessing isn't a daughter rejecting a father. It's a woman reclaiming her identity. One forged in pain, in pride, and in the lingering shadow of an empire that consumed her youth. She has 2 children of her own now. And while she rarely speaks about her private life, those close to her say her parenting is grounded in openness, truth, and above all, emotional honesty. She's breaking a cycle, a friend said. She wants her kids to grow up knowing the truth, not wearing a mask for the cameras. And yet, Brooke's grief is real. In private, she's been devastated by her father's passing. Despite everything, she loved him. In her own words, "Our bond was never broken." But bonds, like mirrors, can crack without breaking entirely. They can hold together just enough to reflect a past that feels distant, even when it's only an arm's length away. The will, according to sources familiar with its draft, allocated portions of Hogan's estate to each of his children. But in a handwritten addendum found in a locked drawer, allegedly updated in the final months before his death, Brooke's name was underlined, followed by the words, "Only if she wants this." A note that reads like both an invitation and a test. That detail alone sparked renewed speculation. Had Hulk Hogan, in his final days, sensed his daughter's internal conflict? Was this his way of giving her a choice, to walk away with love instead of obligation? So when Brooke's legal representative formally submitted the request to relinquish her claim to the estate, it wasn't interpreted as rejection. It was the fulfillment of an unspoken understanding between father and daughter, one that perhaps they had never put into words, but had always felt. Still, the public was unprepared. "Brooke Hogan walks away from millions," the headlines screamed. But the truth is softer, more human than the drama would suggest. She's not walking away from wealth. She's walking toward peace. And yet, the silence that follows her decision is anything but peaceful. The media storm has reignited old wounds, pitting fan loyalty against personal truth. Comment sections are flooded with opinions. Some praising her courage, others condemning her for disrespecting a legend. But Brooke has not responded. Her statement stands alone. Poetic. Introspective. Final. One close friend says Brooke's real audience was never the press, never the fans. It was her father. She knew he'd hear her, wherever he is, they said. That statement wasn't for us. It was for him. And so the story continues, not with a legal battle, but with a daughter choosing memory over money, love over legacy, and truth over tradition. A woman raised in the glitter of the wrestling world, now stepping into a light of her own making, imperfect, honest, and free. The Hogan household, once a spectacle of flashy unity broadcast on television screens across the world, has grown eerily quiet in the aftermath of Brooke Hogan's public statement and her legal withdrawal from her late father's estate. Behind the closed doors of luxury homes, lawyer-filled boardrooms, and memorial gatherings meant to honor a wrestling icon, the air is thick, not with mourning, but with unanswered questions. What happens when the daughter of a legend makes a conscious choice to sever her financial ties, just days after his death? What kind of ripple does that send through the heart of a grieving family already haunted by a complicated legacy? Sources close to the family describe an atmosphere of stunned disbelief. Not because they didn't anticipate emotional fallout, but because Brooke's decision, delivered not with hostility, but with carefully weighed silence, has left those closest to Hulk Hogan unsure of how to respond. They expected a fight, one insider whispered. They didn't expect dignity. While some family members have stayed silent, others, particularly from Hulk Hogan's extended circle, former colleagues, past allies, and distant relatives, have not been as reserved. Whispers of betrayal began to surface in private circles. Some called Brooke disrespectful, others claimed she was trying to rewrite the past. But those closest to the situation say otherwise. If you think this was easy for her, you don't know her, said a source close to Brooke. This nearly broke her. But she did it because it was the only way to truly honor the real man she knew, flawed, complicated, human. This wasn't about rejecting her father's name. Brooke never changed it, never disowned the legacy she was born into. But she did change something else, the rules of inheritance, not just legal, but emotional. She refused to inherit the public lie. She refused to wear the Hogan legacy like a crown when she knew it also came with chains. Publicly, the statement from Brooke was poetic. But it was also purposefully vague. It gave just enough to quiet the vultures but left room for interpretation. Was she referring to the racism scandal? The tabloid wars? The bitter divorce between Hulk and her mother Linda that turned their family into a televised battlefield? Or was she referring to something more private, something never captured by cameras? An individual with knowledge of the will revealed that Brooke was entitled to a substantial portion of her father's estate, multi-million-dollar properties, licensing rights to Hulk Hogan's image, wrestling memorabilia that spans 4 decades, and residuals from past television shows. Walking away meant forfeiting all of it. And yet, her lawyer's letter made it clear, Brooke was not interested in renegotiation, only release. She is no longer beholden to the myth, the source explained. And she wants her children to grow up outside of it. That final point, her children, may very well be the heart of this decision. Though Brooke has kept them out of the spotlight, those close to her say that motherhood radically shifted her worldview. She began to re-examine her childhood through a new lens, questioning the examples she was given, the values she absorbed, and the personas she was expected to maintain. Her children don't need their grandfather's money, said a longtime friend. What they need is a mother who can sleep at night, knowing she didn't pretend something was okay just to secure their financial future. And that's precisely what Brooke feared, that by accepting her portion of the inheritance, she would be agreeing, publicly and privately, that everything that came before was fine. That there were no scars. No unhealed wounds. No behind-the-scenes moments where love and dysfunction blurred beyond recognition. She feared the will would become a silent endorsement, and she wasn't willing to sign her name to that kind of story. Still, the backlash was swift. Social media exploded with polarized reactions. Some fans praised her courage. Others accused her of disrespecting the dead. A hashtag began trending. #StandByTheHulk. But it didn't take long for a second wave to rise, supporters who saw Brooke's decision as not an attack, but a long overdue reckoning. Posts began circulating, sometimes walking away is the loudest way to speak. Journalists reached out. Talk show producers begged for interviews. Tabloids offered six-figure payouts for exclusives. Brooke declined them all. She wasn't interested in monetizing her grief. Not this time. Her silence only added to the mystique. And in that silence, the public began to reconsider. They began to remember moments that seemed strange in hindsight, the dwindling appearances, the guarded interviews, the way Brooke would refer to her father as both a hero and a man learning how to be one. In a 2014 podcast interview, long forgotten until now, Brooke had once said, "There's the dad I knew growing up, and then there's the version of him the world knows. And sometimes, I wish they could have met." At the time, it was brushed off as cryptic. Now, it reads like prophecy. Within the walls of the Hogan family estate, the reading of the will was said to be eerily quiet. Brooke was not present. Her legal team had sent all necessary documentation, formalizing her wishes with the kind of precision that left no room for negotiation. Those who attended described an absence that felt louder than any speech. Hulk Hogan's son, Nick, reportedly received a sizable share of the estate, including several business ventures and assets. But sources say even he was rattled by Brooke's withdrawal. "It was like watching a chapter close without a proper ending," one guest said. There were tears. But there was also confusion. And maybe even guilt. Some speculated that Brooke's decision would eventually be reversed. That in time, after the mourning period passed, emotions would soften, and she'd quietly reclaim what was hers. But those who know her say that won't happen. "This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision," her lawyer said in a rare comment. "This was about principle. This was about integrity. This was about telling the truth, without having to say it out loud." In private, Brooke has reportedly returned to therapy, something she began after her family's reality show ended and the media storm surrounding her father intensified. "She's processing everything," said a friend. "Not just his death, but everything that came before it. And she's not alone in that process." Several figures from Hulk Hogan's past, people who knew him outside the ring, beyond the cameras, have begun speaking with more nuance. One former colleague, a wrestler who shared the ring with him for over a decade, said, "Terry, Hogan's real name, was complicated. He gave me opportunities one never would have had. But he also had a side that didn't know how to say sorry. A side that hurt people and just kept moving like nothing happened." It's this complexity that Brooke's choice confronts. She isn't trying to rewrite history. She's refusing to sanitize it. She's not condemning her father. She's telling the world that sometimes, love means letting go, not holding on tighter. And so, the estate will be divided. The properties, the royalties, the brand will continue to exist, perhaps even grow in value now that Hulk Hogan's name is once again making headlines. But one name will be missing from the paperwork. Brooke. Instead, she's choosing a different legacy. One built not on autographs or action figures, but on accountability. One that says, "I knew him. I loved him. I won't lie for him." As memorial services conclude and tributes fade from front pages, the wrestling world will move on. Fans will remember the man in the red and yellow, the icon who preached about training, prayers, and vitamins. They'll chant his name. Watch his matches. Honor his contributions to a sport that made him immortal. But Brooke Hogan's legacy will be different. Hers is the legacy of truth. And truth, unlike titles and trophies, cannot be split in a will. It must be earned, lived, and, sometimes, sacrificed for. She paid the price. and walked away with nothing but her name. But for the first time in years, that name feels like her own. When a public figure walks away from a legacy, especially one so entrenched in spectacle and patriotism as Hulk Hogan's, the aftershocks are felt far beyond the confines of family. Brooke Hogan's decision to forfeit her inheritance was not just a personal act, it became a cultural event. And now, as the dust begins to settle, institutions connected to Hulk Hogan are forced to reckon with the ripple effect of her choice. At the center of that reckoning, WWE. For decades, Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler, he was the very embodiment of WWE's golden era. Vince McMahon once referred to him as the beating heart of sports entertainment, a man whose presence filled arenas and whose merchandise filled homes. But with Brooke Hogan stepping away from her father's estate and, by extension, the preservation of his public narrative, the WWE is now caught in a precarious balancing act, honoring their icon, while acknowledging the fracture his daughter has exposed. In the immediate aftermath of Hulk Hogan's death, WWE aired an emotionally charged tribute during Monday Night Raw. The crowd was respectful, even reverent. A 10-bell salute, a highlight reel of matches, and a final shot of Hogan posing in the ring, red and yellow bandana catching the spotlight like it always did. But something was missing, Brooke Hogan. Not in the audience.